How are we going to start the conversation? Have we started already?
Perhaps. I feel like one thing that I've experienced so far being on OS for like 10 years is that OS doesn't really run itself like a business, does it?
Yeah, for sure. We all know how it started. It was just a hobby to me. It was never meant to be a project which became a community or became something larger than me just trying something out. And when it did, one of the main driving factors was that people were enjoying playing the game. People just piled on from places I never knew existed. I never really spread the word of the game, so it was all word of mouth in the early days of the internet. As the community grows, I've just been listening to what people need from the game and how people are enjoying the game and tried to make sure that we continue to provide that experience.
What do you think really makes you different from other game developers, though? See, the first thing that comes to mind, you answer emails. It's such a simple thing, but most game developers just don't do that. Most game developers don't just respond to things on Twitter.
It's not that I aim to do things differently, but I aim to do things the way I see they should be done. I look at what other games are doing, and most of the times I get pissed off seeing what they're doing, pissed off seeing the way the industry is going these days. So a big part of it is just keeping us true to what it was from the start, preserving that kind of the same feel that made me and all the early adopters of the game enjoy it so much. And even as the community changes over the years to be more competitive, focus shifts to tournaments, meme culture, and in the early days there's a lot more focus on mapping. These days it's more on the playing side of the game. I still want to try, not that I want to push for it, but keep that creative elements, the focus on mapping, the focus on skinning, the focus on the community being very involved in the development process of the game. I want to keep that as true as we can.
Okay, so we're moving on to lazer in the big scope of things.
Yeah.
You want to keep things true to how it was in the very beginning, but you're also basically making a whole new game.
Yes.
How does that even work?
Yeah, we can see from the way the community has reacted to the development of lazer so far that there's definitely, it's not just me that wants to keep this, the feel of the game. There's a lot of the community who is pushing back against the new UI we're doing and the new layouts. Partly because people don't like change, we know that, but also there's a certain feel that people have come to expect. And I respect that, and I respect that people are pushing back against lazer. That's why we've been doing a lot of work trying to bring back the features or the UI structure, the things that the people want from the game.
What I think really makes you stand out as a dev is that you're actually paying attention to that. There's a billion games out there that they have a vision for their game and they're just going to make that vision.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what people say about it. They can think it's shit and it doesn't matter.
For sure.
Maybe you do have a vision. I don't know what your vision is necessarily, but you also just try to accommodate for everyone. So with all these groups that are like within the OS community, how are you really going to like try to accommodate for all of them?
Yes.
We'll answer that later.
There we go. We're recording.
We're recording, okay. So Peppy, may come as a surprise to you, but lazer is supported on mobile devices.
Really?
It's an interesting thing though, because to make lazer fit your, I guess, community-oriented vision thing, you have to account for this whole new audience. How do you plan on really doing that?
Mobile's a bit of a hard one because obviously we haven't supported it until now, and when we do, there's going to be a flood of new members of the community, a whole heap of people experiencing the game for the first time. And that's one of the reasons we've delayed the release until now. When we bring mobile users into the game, it's going to need a few considerations like how to handle leaderboards, how to handle scoring when you have players being able to touch the screen, basically getting absolute input at a higher speed than you could on a tablet or a mouse. So there's leaderboard considerations, but also, how to introduce these new players to the community in a way that they can potentially participate in the forums, in the beat mapping, in the skinning. We've tried to get a lot of this functionality in the game, so they don't need to go to the website, they don't need to exit the game to actually get the experience, but there's still some things missing. So it's going to be, interesting to see how the mobile uptake goes.
I feel like mobile is a bit more strict when it comes to like content and stuff.
Yeah, I'm not sure how strict it is as such, but at least if I was introducing us to a new audience at this point in the development cycle, my due diligence at this point, considering how much music we have licensed, would be to try and set new users coming into the game up in a better way to understand how licensing works and that they probably shouldn't just be loading in their own music.
That's what you're already doing with the, you have to have featured artists enabled by default in the beatmap listing and probably more stuff going forward, I'm sure.
Yeah, and that's applying to desktop as well. It's not like we're doing this just on mobile releases or anything. Obviously, we will try not to break the user experience for people that do want to play the other non-licensed material, but pushing that to the front makes sense at this point. I think one thing about mobile users is getting into a mobile game, you have, the average mobile user has a very different set of expectations. Usually games are very hand-holding, guide you through the experience because you're downloading this app from the App Store, not from the else website or anything where we can potentially add some, instructions and stuff. I've already started to, in Lazer, there's the first run wizard, which kind of introduces a few of the features of the games, but I think we're going to have to continue to expand on that and just get the new user experience up to par, up to scratch of what is expected from a mobile game. But at the same time, we're not cutting back any functionality. Mobile is going to have the editor, all the features that you would expect on desktop. We're not changing anything. So that's also adding a bit of complexity, obviously, because we need to make sure all the interfaces work in both desktop and mobile across all these different tablets and phones and super wide phones.
Seems like it's going to be kind of impossible, but I'd like to see how you can manage that.
Try our best.
Mobile is an interesting thing because it feels like OS has forever just been this PC game. It didn't even work on Macs before, but now it's going to go to mobile, which is I think it's the largest gaming audience in the world, basically. Because of that, you're probably going to get a lot more feedback. How are you going to manage all of that going on at once?
I have no idea. It's going to be the kind of thing where we push it out and might just have to ignore a lot of the feedback to start with. My focus is always going to be on the desktop, on the PC platforms. We need to get them up to scratch and make sure that the users can switch across from stable to laser. So mobile is going to take a backseat even after we push out releases. I'm sure we'll see improvements over the years to the point where it hopefully becomes a usable mobile app.
Usable mobile app that's probably more complicated than anything else on the App Store, yeah.
Yeah. Choose your ice cream.
Can you give me a clap? Welcome to Enoshima. You don't really see. You see the mainland. Enoshima is that way. Why do you bring me to Enoshima?
I don't know. It's kind of nice.
See, I thought it was sort of, thought it was supposed to be a metaphor because mappers are just like an island or a tiny island now. So you want mappers to use laser. Okay, wait, let me rephrase that. Mappers don't like laser.
Most mappers don't like laser.
The only real mappers I know that are using laser are using it to see, can I even make a map with it? And then they do it and they're like, well, that was really hard. I don't want to do that ever again. How do you think laser will actually get these mappers to start using laser? Because right now everyone's really satisfied with stable and they have a lot of complaints about laser.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because the whole editor in stable is nothing special. If you don't know how to use that editor, it's very hard to get used to it. The problem is that all these mappers have been mapping for years now, and they know exactly how to use that editor, and it feels like, second nature. So to get people over to laser, we're going to have to implement all the things that people want from stable. That's kind of the plan.
So you're going to have to implement things that are probably bad just to match what users expect?
Yeah, pretty much. Most of the feedback I've heard is people using specific hotkeys to access UI forms and stuff, which don't yet exist. So the hope is that we can hide these legacy features behind hotkeys that most people don't know about or use. And there's also a hope that the new way we've done to rotate selections or something, that's something which mappers will gradually come to appreciate and use rather than these legacy controls. I see it more of a migration of user behavior over time. And if that doesn't happen, obviously we've done something wrong. So back to the thinking board.
Do you think the laser editor is the least developed part of laser so far?
No, I wouldn't say that. The editor is probably the most complex part of the game. So maybe it feels that way because it's still missing some of these features which people just expect to be there. And they're like, why are they not there yet? At the same time, we've made some good improvements in the editor, I think. In certain areas, slider generation is a lot easier. And then there's areas which we have absolutely dropped the ball into now, like hit sounding. So yeah, it's a bit of a mixed bag right now. I agree with myself.
Do you think mappers who use stable editor right now are going to ever really want to switch to the laser editor? Do you think they're a lost cause?
Yeah, I hope to be able to bring them over. That's my goal. That's kind of what drives my development for the editor. Yeah, and as always, if you try it and you're not able to use it for a certain reason, definitely let us know that specific reason or the reasons so we can focus our attention to those pieces of the puzzle.
Make a GitHub post.
Or just tweet at me.
Or that. Or an email, there's lots of ways. Anyway, let's talk about players. Oh, it's still going. I'm going right. So, okay, players are a pretty big bunch. We're going to categorize this a little bit more clearly. So there's casual players. They're probably the biggest group, right?
I'd say so, yep.
Do you think they're the one that has accepted laser the most so far?
That's a hard one to answer. I don't really have metrics on it.
What about your gut feeling, though?
I think so. I think a lot of the feedback I hear from people that have switched to laser and are outwardly outspoken about their switch to laser have been the more of the casual side of players.
You added laser to the download page.
Finally.
Are you gonna replace the stable download at some point?
For new users, you mean?
Yeah.
I think the next step would be switching the order around. So laser is on the left, not the right. That is the eventual goal. Obviously, the stable link will always be on the download page, but it'll become something more like the fallback link where it's just smaller text in the corner for those that really want to stick with stable.
So what do you think you need to do for casual players to truly accept laser?
The casual players group is such a huge group. It varies from, people that don't care about PP to the people that potentially watch the pro players or watch the tournaments and are very interested in seeing their own performance relative. And then you'd have the middle ground where a lot of people play games and they just like to see increasing stats. So to go back to your question, what do we need to do to get the casual players to accept laser? I think we need to have these metrics tracked and tracked in a permanent way. Right now we're doing kind of leaderboard resets along the way, and potentially the stats on their profile aren't all updating correctly or updating on the laser specific profile page. I think we need to combine all that and just get it to the point where someone isn't like, oh, but if I play on laser, my main profile isn't going to update. And we're already on good track to make that happen, I think, with the recent community meeting where we're starting to discuss the final balance passes with the ongoing work on anti-cheat, which I'm currently working on. All the pieces are starting to come together. So
cool. There's more types of players, though. The guys who want to get PP. They want to see that number up, but only one number.
all they want is their PP.
Let's talk about PP. We walk into holding this. I'm an insane person looking at food right now. Test.
Test.
Is PP your worst nightmare?
I wouldn't say that. It was something I didn't see coming in terms of the game's development cycle. It was obviously a community project that it started off as, and
I feel like it might be something terrifying because it's generated an entire new kind of player. The player who disregards having fun. They just want to have scores and that's it. That's something that's really hard to account for in laser because there's all this anti-cheat stuff and feeling exactly right because they need to get optimal gameplay for optimal scores and all that. How can you even deal with someone who wants a literal replica of stable because that's what they're used to?
yeah, it's one of the reasons I'm grateful that we do have stable to keep these players satisfied while we try and get laser on the same level. How we're going to get there is basically just keep iterating until we have things in the correct place. In the history of OS development, we have had cases back before laser was even a thing where the game's balance, it was realized that there's a bug which has been affecting the game's balance, and we have been able to deal with that in the past, whether it be deleting certain scores or rolling back to a certain point in history. So I think to an extent we can still deal with that, but we're definitely going to have things in a good place before we commit to having permanent, persistent leaderboards.
So I went to Osu LAN, and one thing they said about laser when I had them try it was something about it doesn't feel right. There's always something, and it's never consistent what that something is.
It's very clear that you have a lot of attempts on that. How does it feel different in laser versus stable?
It feels pretty clean. Yeah, I can only say that it feels clumsy.
But I feel like there was a little more latency on laser.
Flashlight in general feels a little bit different. Maybe it's placebo because there was still a noticeable disconnect in how my aim felt.
It does feel pretty different.
Laser Mania feels more mashy than the original Mania already was.
Right now it's in a really good spot where it's even better than stable. The only real complaint that I personally have is the audio sometimes desyncs with the hit sounds.
It's something about the approach circles. I can't tell what it is.
Only players with thousands and thousands of hours in stable are able to see the subtle differences between gameplay.
There is going to be a point where we can't fix it for certain players that just feel like the game is playing differently for whatever reason, whether that be that the input latency is lower in laser. But at the point where we can no longer, frame analyze replays or people's recordings of the game and find the differences that people are experiencing, at that point, I think we're just going to have to call it a day. And the people who say it's different to the point they're not willing to make the switch across are going to have to stay on stable for the time being. And those that are saying it feels different, but potentially different in a better way, well, we can deal with that, right? As long as we're confident that we haven't changed any game mechanics in a way that's going to break the history of the leaderboards.
That's another whole topic. Have you ever considered making the leaderboards show PP order?
The Smoogie really wants to see that happen, and I hope we'll be able to make it happen, even if it's just an option that a player can choose. I always had this vision of score-based leaderboards being the simpler way of comparing scores, right? Because PP was kind of made as a metric to compare players, not to compare scores on the same beat map. But at this point, I think people are starting to understand PP values better than score values. that's where this want to have the leaderboards showing PP-based ordering comes from, I guess.
I mean, even with the laser changing into a million score max per map, people are still going to, at least this subset of players is really going to just admire PP more than...
Yeah, exactly. It's a work in progress, and we're making good progress. Again, with the community meeting, we've had some really good feedback from the pro players that joined us for that, and I think we'll continue to ask for more feedback from the community until we have things as close as we can.
Speaking of pro players, I need to drink for this one. Do you think tournament players are the hardest ones to deal with?
I would say so. Tournament players expect a lot, expect things to behave exactly as they want it to be, as they're used to, as they've trained.
Everything about their systems break if they don't have like perfect precision gameplay. Because what's a tournament if people are like half able to compete? Tournaments and lasers, a direction that you wanted to go at one point, but it seems like you want to drop that. Why is that?
Yeah, I did have a thought that we would be able to use tournaments as an end goal. Sometimes in laser development we hit like a brick wall and we're not sure what to work on next. And the thought process was that maybe getting laser used in tournaments would be something we could aim for and look at fixing all the things that still remain as blockers to hit that goal. But in further discussion at the last community meeting, I was basically told that that's not a good idea.
So there is no IRC access or lobby commands for refs?
We need like more tooling because at the moment we just have like spreadsheets, and in some cases for the World Cups we use a special client, but that does not have like compatibility.
I feel like the idea of forcing players to use laser before it's proven itself to be in a competitively viable state is not the correct direction to go through.
Laser will not be used for tournaments until either players prefer laser or it is in some way significantly easier for tournament organizers.
The people that we're talking know better than I do, so I am more than willing to take their advice there. I think we need to satisfy the rest of the community, the rest of the player groups, before aiming to move any kind of serious tournaments to laser.
So, Lucer's not going to have tournaments anytime soon. Okay.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I would say I would really like to see some more casual tournaments, just none of the major ones.
We're not going to see ones with real top players probably. So then what do you need to really make it tournament ready even?
The major issues with tournaments moving over is having every single player agree to play on laser. And that's a huge ask.
I mean, like, I will be stuck on stable until like all the tournaments move over because, I mean, I'm not a tournament player, but...
And this is the kind of case where if the input latency is better on laser, they're still going to have to practice and relearn potential muscle memory, audio-visual response, rewirings in their brain to make them happy with laser. That's going to take some time.
Who else really is there?
I don't know, Skinners? Modders?
Let's start with Skinners, because skinning is something that laser is reinventing, I want to say. How's it doing that?
Yeah, so while we've kept all the old skinning elements, we've also added a lot of new customization and the ability to drag image into the game or animations into the game just to instantly get them in there. Something which wasn't possible in stable, where people were using the existing elements to make things work in a weird hacky way. Laser is going to make skinning a lot more flexible, a lot less hacky. You know, at some point it's going to be better than stable.
I think it's already better than stable. I think that's the one thing that laser has like so down perfectly. Well, it's not done yet, but it's even improving right now. Modding? What is there about modding?
Modding is a hard one because we do have this eventual imagined goal of having modding in the editor, you know, create discussions from the editor from a specific point in time without exiting the game, but we're nowhere near that.
Whenever that does happen, I think modders will actually become a much more significant part of the game. Because right now, a lot of people don't really mod in the same way they did before. Like, modding is much less of a giant user group as it was back then.
Yeah.
And if you were able to, like, actually implement all this stuff into the editor and into the game itself, there'd be so many people who like access modding that otherwise would just never touch it. It feels like laser will invent new types of players, people who enjoy the game in ways that just don't do it right now.
Yeah.
There can be so many different types of players in the world after laser. I think I'll just end it there. Okay. It wasn't even a proper clap. Beautiful. We finished our bike ride. We went from Yokohama area all the way down to the beach at...
Kamakura.
I already forgot the name. And then we went to Enoshima. That was the island. But yeah, it was a fun trip, and we made a lot of comments on laser user acceptance along the way. Going back to the very, very beginning, though, we talked about how you are a very different developer than, like, people who work for massive games, like, I'm not going to name any games, but massive games. And that ties really closely into how you handle user acceptance for your game. How do other like AAA games handle that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen in recent years that a lot of the big games are, for instance, when they release a sequel, not to mention any names, they'll release a sequel to a game and just shut down the old one. Even people that have bought it just don't have access anymore. And I mean, I see that and I get pretty annoyed at it. It's not the way I would do it, and it's not the way I'm going to do it with Lazer.
How are you going to do it with Lazer then?
Yeah, well, it's going to be a very gradual thing, and it's going to be up to the users to really make the switch. I wouldn't care if people decided that Lazer was just bad and they decided to stay unstable for the rest of their life. That just means we haven't done our job. The point of Lazer wasn't to reinvent the wheel, it was to fix a lot of the issues with the wheel, make it run smoother. Obviously, we're not 100% there yet, but I think we're hopefully getting there.
It's hard to really understand, like, from a perspective of a player, because I feel like every player sees the way that you, like, present Lazer, and they assume you're trying to act like other game developers. You're trying to be like, guys, everyone needs to play Lazer right now. But you're not doing that. You are taking a completely different approach that is seemingly unheard of in video games.
And it's a bit frustrating as well, because a lot of the players, especially people that have come into the OS community more recently, they have these expectations of how development is done, and I've always done things differently, but I've never really changed the way I've done things since the start of OS. So people look at the way Lazer's being developed and pushed out to users, and they're like, why are you doing it this way? Why aren't you pushing harder, or why aren't you getting the base product out first so we can actually switch to it? And the simple answer is that that's not how I've developed the game. You know that, right?
Just OS in general has this really strong community that controls the game, and you, as the main developer, allow that to happen. And a lot of game communities just don't have that kind of luxury. They don't have the option of actually having any control over the development of a game. I guess the point is the direction you're taking will lead to a lot more user acceptance than something like games which we're not going to name.
I mean, the important thing is that people that are enjoying the game right now, I want them to be able to continue to enjoy the game that they know, which is why Stable is going to be around for many years to come. We're going to see new players come into the game, and their first experience is going to be Lazer. That's all they're going to know. They're going to look back at Stable and be like, what is this client? It looks so old. So I think we're going to see the new players coming in. That's going to be some of the people that increase the population of Lazer, but then there's also going to be a gradual migration of the existing users as people become more receptive for one reason or another. If we get the new features in which they're waiting for, or if they just give it another try and give it a try for long enough that they become used to it and realize it's better. The hope is that we can, eventually get to that 100% number, like we did with Fallback and Stable. Yeah.
Well, that's user acceptance on Lazer.
Pretty much.
Goodbye.